If you decide to put in pavers yourself, the first thing to do is to find a pattern you like. I'm showing you a pattern that we had in place on our patio in the backyard, so my next project of putting in a paver walkway then is going to match the pattern that we already have in place. And of course, if you want to match the pavers you have, then it's a good idea to probably pull up one or two of the pavers, especially if you have various colors in the pavers, and take them to your various paver supply businesses to see if you can't match them. It sometimes is hard to match them because after years they get a little more worn at the edges, and they also fade a little bit in color. The next thing to think about is the collection of tools that you may need. We have here a single jack that I use for breaking the brick, rubber mallet, 32-ounce one, fairly inexpensive at someplace like Ace Hardware, is absolutely essential for adjusting the brick once it's in place, the pavers once they're in place. A fairly inexpensive grind wheel. These are good for making fairly smooth cuts on the stone, straight ones or curving ones. They wear out very quickly, so cutting deeper into pavers with these is probably not the best option. Better to go to a diamond blade. These blades are set up for a 4-inch grinder, fairly inexpensive at some place like Harbor Freight. The blade or the grinder cup that I have on here is a diamond grinder cup, and very useful and necessary for finishing off some of the cuts. I use a little wrecking bar to help lift the pavers up and out of the formation. Once you're putting them in place, if you find you have to adjust them, you can jock them around and lift them up sometimes with that. Use a straight edge for drawing your lines. Get a masonry pencil. It washes off fairly easily, but you can sharpen it pretty nicely and draw straight lines. Some sort of face protection, either small glasses like this or a little larger goggles. Good idea to have a damp cloth around to wipe the concrete dust off of them, because the dust covers the glasses and you can't see fairly short order. Earplugs or some sort of ear protection. Rubber gloves are pretty handy in dealing with bricks, and a little clamps to help hold down your bricks while you're cutting them. I've set up a really inexpensive but functional workbench here with a couple old sawhorses and a fairly sturdy pine plank that I've screwed to the sawhorses, and gives me a good solid foundation. Some more equipment that you should think about getting is a tamper, a level. Depending on how big an area you're doing, you may want to have a longer level. Straight edge can also act as a level extender. Just put the level on top of the straight edge. Put the level on top of the brick, and then the straight edge on top of the brick, and then the level on top of that. So that gives you sort of a manufactured extended level. It's a good idea to get your edging right away. Have that handy and available. Obviously have your brick, your pavers, and if there are multiple colors, it's very helpful to sort them out into piles that have a similar looking color to them. pick out your area that you're going to put in your pavers, remove your grass, and if you've got fairly solid material that's non-organic underneath it, you don't have to go really deep. Put in some gravel, as little as a couple inches. It will work if your material underneath is of good solid inorganic material, and especially too if you don't have a lot of water in the soil. It stays fairly dry. And then get yourself some damp sand. It's good to keep it damp. I just bought some bags of it. It's kind of an expensive way to go, but if you don't have a lot of work to be done with the pavers, a few bags like this will do the trick and give you the amount of sand you need underneath the pavers. Again, you don't need a lot of sand if you've got fairly solid subgrade and you've put down a little bit of gravel, and then you can lay your sand. I use the edging by cutting in between all of the tie down sections. I use that to help me draw the corners. You can set them up and curve that to create a nice line for drawing your corners. And then something that is kind of important to keep in mind is once you have that line that you need to cut on your bricks, plan on cutting a little bit to the outside of that line, and then using that grinder cup I showed you earlier to grind it back after you've cut your line. And another important point I think is very helpful is come outside that line, come outside your cut line and cut a straight line, and then use the grinder cup to create the curve. If you try to cut a curve and break off the brick by snapping it on a curve, the chances of success are somewhat reduced from cutting a straight line in the brick. And then of course once you get it all tapped into place, put in your edging and lock it down, and then you're ready to put your sand top coat on. You can either use regular sand, apparently about 80% of the pavers that go in, the people use just regular sand, or you can use some of the new poly sands that have a kind of a concrete mixture in them, so they set up slightly and prevents ants from taking the sand out and weeds from coming up through. So those are probably the key components of cutting your own brick. The thing to remember is try to cut the full depth of your 4-inch cut saw, so you have a very small amount of brick that has to be broken away. But even then, even if you do that, you still may find your brick or pieces breaking on you when they shouldn't. In other words, just snapping in half. So sometimes it takes multiple cuts before you get a whole brick. So you just have to be patient and keep working away at it. But as you do, you'll get better at it, and the failures, broken bricks where they shouldn't be breaking, will be reduced. In preparing the foundation for your pavers, it's a good idea to run your width and leveling strings. To some extent, the angle and level of your pavers is going to be dictated a little bit by the ground. So my driveway obviously is higher than this, so I have a slight slope to the pavers, outside slope. which actually also helps water drain, because I intend to use poly sweep sand that will be somewhat impervious to water through the cracks, and so the water will have to run off. And then of course I need to have the top of the bricks just slightly underneath the bottom of the fence and the gate. So that dictates the elevation of the pavers across the length of the walkway to be installed. When cutting the brick and you've kind of gone in on each edge as deep as your 4-inch grinder generally will allow, then I like to put the side that I'm going to save to the clamp down bench side, have the piece that I'm going to snap off on the outside edge, and then with the single jack have that edge pretty closely lined up with the edge of your sharp edge of your platform. Try to make just one sharp hit, just one snap hit, to kind of a shock hit. And don't try not to hit on the edge of your hammer, try to hit on that flat surface of your hammer. And then of course the remaining material here, it's very simple to grind it off with the cup grinder. I just take off the diamond edge blade and then put on the diamond face cup grinder and shave that off. And you can even take a little bit off the edge here to get a kind of a edge that's a little more rounded, however you like.